and mindful, you should develop immeasurable concentration. In other words, concentration based on the immeasurable loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity. When wise and mindful, one has developed immeasurable concentration, 5 realizations arise right within oneself. The realization first arises right within oneself that this concentration is blissful in the present and will result in bliss in the future. The realization arises right within oneself that this concentration is noble and not connected with the baits of the flesh. The realization arises right within oneself that this concentration is not obtained by base people. The realization arises right within oneself that this concentration is peaceful, exquisite, the acquiring of serenity and the attainment of unity not kept in place by the fabrications of forceful restraint. The realization arises right within oneself that I enter into this concentration mindfully, and mindfully I emerge from it. Wise and mindful, you should develop immeasurable concentration. When wise and mindful, one has developed immeasurable concentration, these 5 realizations arise right within oneself. These are the words of the Buddha from a discourse that he gave on samadhi, on immeasurable concentration. Today we're here talking about Chan, or in the Japanese word Zen. In the original Buddhist teachings, the word is jhana. Jhana means the different stages that a person practices when they go through the steps within concentration or samadhi. So these practices are what we refer to in Sanskrit as dhyana, but also in Chan, in the Chinese. So this state of deep concentration, immeasurable concentration, which is based on the integration of loving kindness and compassion, altruistic joy and equanimity as a foundation, this state is, in a sense, very different from the normal kind of thinking, feeling mind that we usually walk around with. This walking around with mind that is not privy to the practice of deep concentration, we call this discursive self-referential thinking, or self-referential discursive thinking in psychology. This is a term that's used. Discursive means that the mind is going from one subject to the next subject with the next subject, trying to make sense out of it. Self-referential means is that the main character of the subject is ourselves. So to be able to let go of self-referential discursive thinking, this is what we mean when we say we enter into the jhana, enter into Chan. We're able to let go of this kind of self-referential discursive thinking. I'll give you a little example. So my secretary, Sarah, recently had a baby. He is now 4 months old. He comes to the office every day when she's working, and if I get a break, I have the opportunity to put him down on the floor, and I try to give him rolling over lessons. He's not particularly enthusiastic about this. Particularly if he's on his back, he's kind of comfortable on his back. If we put him on his tummy, he gets a little bit excited, but he doesn't know how to roll over. I discuss this with him. I try to put his arms and legs in the right position. So far, no success. I have a patient who has a little baby who's 5.5 months old, and he was in the office and he rolled over. So I took a video of him on the phone of rolling over so I could show Sarah's baby. Maybe he'll figure it out from the video. Then I thought, he's having so much trouble with this, I will have to write him a manual on how to walk. So the first page of the manual would start off by saying, you will fall 1,000 times, it will hurt, and you will cry. And then I realized, this is not a good manual. There's a reason why it is that we learn to walk before we have discursive thought. Because if we had self-referential discursive thought and we were learning how to walk, we would quit. We would stop walking. I'm sure of it. We would see people laughing at us and we would say, oh no, this is it. After I would fall 501 times, I would say, no, I'm even though I'm halfway there, not going to go any further. So the child doesn't have the neural connections that are set up for self-referential discursive thought. So the child keeps going and says, okay, I'm going to achieve walking, no problem. He doesn't think. He just experiences his senses, and he has his object of concentration, walking. So there was a time in the 7th century, I think, probably, where there was a man, his name we'll get to in a minute. He was working for his family and delivering firewood, and one day when he delivered the firewood, he heard an old man talking, reciting, chanting verses. And suddenly he heard a verse in Chinese. Caddy can help me with the verse into Chinese.
因无所住，
而生其
而
心.
生其心。
So this can be translated in a number of different ways, but one way that Thich Nhat Hanh translates it, they should give rise to an intention with their minds not dwelling anywhere. There may be different translations we can use. Literal translation would be, should not object abide and arise in mind. So as soon as this fellow heard this, suddenly he had an awakening in his mind. And he went on, he asked the man when he finished his recitation, where did you learn this? And he said, oh, at the East Mountain Monastery. He says, where is that? He said, oh, pointed the direction where it is. And Huineng went home and he took off his smock and he gave it to his parents and he said, I'm going now to the monastery to practice. And that was the beginning of the story that Huineng, the sixth in the sequence of great Chan masters, talks about how he entered into the practice. Now we know that Chan was originally brought by Bodhidharma, who came from India, and he brought with him one text, the text called the Xiankuan Sutra. Very difficult text. And this was the teaching that he practiced when he was doing his teachings of the students. By the time 6 generations later, 5 generations later, that Chan had developed, they were also using another teaching called the Diamond Sutra. Today we will chant from our chanting book the last chapter of the Diamond Sutra. We first do it in English, and then at the end we'll do it in Chinese. So this sutra is the one that Huineng's teacher was teaching at the Eastern Mountain Monastery. And at the time that Huineng received his instructions, right before he became the 6th in the lineage, he sat with his teacher, the 5th teacher, Rang, and he was given special instructions that have to do with the last chapter from the Diamond Sutra. And one particular verse, we believe, was the one that he was instructed on, that we read together. All composed things are like a dream, a phantom, a bubble, a shadow, a drop of dew, a flash of lightning. That is how to meditate on them. That is how to observe them. We will read that in English and then in Chinese later. This was the essence of perhaps what we believe Huineng was instructed in his becoming a Chan master. So the word Chan is actually an unusual Chinese word because on one side of the character is a picture of a person chasing you with a pitchfork, screaming at you. That's not very meditative. And on the other side is a person who is very grounded, who can see things from above. So this is a picture of a person who is able to transcend worldly difficulties, worldly sufferings. And so this kind of practice is why we practice our meditation, mindfulness, so that we don't become pulled by worldly suffering. We're able to maintain our ability to see things from a higher stage. So the word Chan is found in a number of different teachings. In the Xiankuan Sutra that was brought by Bodhidharma from India to China, there's a reference to what's called Si-Chan, which is the 4 types of meditation, 4 progressively subtle stages of meditation that lead one out of the desire realm. There's also a reference to the word Chana. So this is the transliteration of dhyana or jhana. We know that word is used throughout all of the Chan schools. So as Chan developed after Huineng, Master gave a talk last time, in which he outlined how things came to Huineng and then to Baizhang, and how the Zen practice, the Chan practitioners learned to grow their own food so that they wouldn't be a burden or dependent upon the communities for having to go and get alms. Throughout this lineage then developed, there were 5 schools, or 5 houses, or 5 families, depending on how you want to translate it, of which 2 still exist today. One being Linji, which is in Japanese Renzai. This is the tradition that we practice through here. And then the other is the Caodong school, or Soto school, which is also very popular in Japan, and some of the Zen schools are very connected to Soto, which is actually a combination word from 2 Chinese masters, Shaoshan and Dongshan. They took their first names and put them together and made Caodong, and now it's called Soto. There were 3 other schools that developed as well, but they emerged, they actually were absorbed by the other schools, and there were actually even 7 schools originally, 2 other ones that didn't last for too long. And if you really want to go into detail, there are even smaller lineages that lasted for just a short period of time. So these 4 types of meditation that Bodhidharma taught from the Lankavatara Sutra. The first one is a meditation that has to do with selflessness. The first meditation, this has to do with selflessness of person and understanding impermanence, suffering, and impurity. So really a lot of emphasis on the Dharma seals of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and no self, and adding to that the precept practice of learning how to become free from afflictions. So the purity of the mind. So this is the first type of meditation practice that is mentioned in the Lankavatara. The second one investigates how it is that it's not just the self that is empty of inherent existence, but also all dharmas are selfless as well. All experiences, all things outside of one's own self-referential system, also empty of inherent existence. So this notion of emptiness, of inherent existence, particularly unique to the Mahayana school, talks about how it is that all things are interdependent, interconnected, that we can't exist solely from our own side, and that our self-referential system is so strong that we see ourselves so strongly that we fail to see the interconnectedness. We've lost our direct experience of interconnectedness, and that we would have to re-establish that in the same way that the child would re-establish the ability to roll over or to stand up and to walk. We need to re-establish our interconnectedness stronger than our selfishness. And if I were to write a manual about that, I would say, we will fall 1,000 times, it will hurt, and we will cry. So the third type of meditation is, and the third and the fourth require a person really to have more direct experience. Once we are able to let go of our selfishness, our self-centeredness, and we can then see things more directly And so the third and the fourth meditations have to do with a transformation of the mind from our normal way of looking at things into what is called a new, different viewpoint of the mind, which is called tathagata, which is going from one shore to the next into a different consciousness level, beyond the normal consciousness that we would think of. So, coming back to samadhi, to this practice of going into the state of concentration, we practice mindfulness in order to be able to calm the mind, have enough clarity within the mind that we can focus on our ability to keep the mind from wandering very far. And when the mind is able not to wander very far, just to stay very one-pointed, then the mind can enter into deeper states of concentration. These are samadhi states. So sometimes this is described as the unification of the mind in concentration, stopping the floating of the mind and thereby concentrating on one point. So some of these terminologies are a little bit difficult because really if you just take out of context the idea of stopping the floating of the mind without understanding what that is, and we try to make the mind blank or something like that, then we're going to miss the point. Because we're not trying to make the mind blank. We're just attempting to train the mind so that it's able to stay on the object of concentration. So we start off with the breath, then we practice with the body. The mind becomes very calm and peaceful. When it wanders, we're able to detect it and gently bring it back without any criticism or congratulations. We just continue to bring the mind back. And this then allows the mind to become unified. And then the floating of the mind, or the chattering of the mind, really is something that is able to stop by itself. So there are these different factors that come into play with what's going on when the mind begins to calm itself down. The first two factors are called in Pali vitaka and vichara, which means how the mind begins to start chattering and sustains its chattering. So when we're able to concentrate and focus in this way, then this kind of chattering subsides by itself. We don't have to try to do it, it just happens, just in the same way that when a child gets his body in the right position and rolls over, it just happens. If you doubt me, I have a video. It just happens. There's that moment where the child is on the side, and then he just tips his balance one way, and then suddenly he's on his back looking up saying, oh wow. But probably the child is not saying, oh wow, he's just looking up. There's no self-referential discursive thinking. Now obviously we're not little babies, we have the connections, the neural connections in the mind. We're not trying to get rid of those kind of neural connections. We're learning to train them so that, because the baby can't enter into willfully mindfulness state. You have to train the mind in order to do that. So this discursive thought, this vitaka and vichara, this chattering of the mind, we may use it effectively when we are having to do something for in a computational kind of way. If we're planting in the garden, we're having to make certain decisions. If we're driving the car, we're making certain decisions. When we go to work, we have to make certain decisions. We need to use our discursive thinking. And in the Yogacara system, and Chan is really a blending of the Yogacara system and the Madhyamaka system. These two systems come together in the Yogacara system. This kind of discursive thinking that we use in our daily life, this is important. This is part of what's called the sixth consciousness. We have the five senses, and then we have the mind, the sixth consciousness. We need that. But when we sit in meditation, we don't need that. There's nothing that we're having to do. So, our practice not requiring the six consciousnesses, then we see how strong the seventh consciousness is. The seventh consciousness is the self-referential discursive thinking. It's chattering away, isn't it? We don't have to be doing anything. We say, okay, I'm going to put my mind on my breath. And what happens? Lots of chattering. Feelings in the body, chattering, distraction to the outside world. Lots of things happen. And we say, oh, I'm supposed to be focusing on my breath. 15 minutes later, we figure that out. We come back, and then we start chattering away again. Until finally, when we practice, we realize, oh, this is pretty difficult. So we practice every day for 3 or 4 months, and then we realize, oh, my mind doesn't go quite so far. I'm being able to bring my mind in a little bit more, and then we feel a certain kind of peacefulness, perhaps, a certain kind of quietude, a certain aspect of our life where we maybe once had quarrels and difficulties and opposition to the outside world. These things begin to subside. We're not even trying to do it. It's just the mind doesn't want to go there. So this in Zen is called understanding Wushin, which is no mind. So at first, the only time we have the no mind state is when we're in deep sleep. We don't even remember our dreams. So there's another state where they talk about, you're in the no mind state maybe when you're dying in extreme agony. So there's so much distraction, you've lost your mind in that regard. That's not a positive. But then there is this meditation state that we can enter into, where our mind becomes free of this discursive thinking, particularly about ourselves. So when it comes across an object, normally we would perform some kind of mental operation, where we would see it and then we would try to make an analysis, but because we're on the cushion, we don't need to do that. I'm going to read to you from another sutta, original teaching of the Buddha, called the tip of the fingernail. Then the Blessed One, picking up a little bit of dust, with the tip of his fingernail, said to the monks, "What do you think, monks? Which is greater? The little bit of dust I have just picked up with the tip of my fingernail, or the great earth?" The monks respond, "The great earth is far greater, Blessed One. The little bit of dust the Blessed One has picked up with the tip of his fingernail is next to nothing. It is not 100th, 1,000th, or 100,000ths. This little bit of dust the Blessed One has picked up with the tip of his fingernail when compared with the great earth." The Buddha continues, "In the same way, monks, for a disciple of the noble ones who is consummate in view, an individual who has broken through to stream entry, the suffering and stress that is totally ended and extinguished is far greater. That which remains in the state of having at most 7 remaining lifetimes is next to nothing. It is not 100th, 1,000th, or 100,000ths when compared to the previous mass of suffering. That is how the benefit of breaking through to the Dhamma, monks, that is how the great benefit is of obtaining the Dhamma I, the Dhamma I." So the Buddha is saying here that when a person enters into the first stage of the path, called stream entry, they have left behind so much of their suffering. All that's left is just from the tip of the fingernail, just a little bit left. But still, that little bit left, it takes a lot of effort. This stream enterer has, in fact, been able to let go of 3 of the 10 what are called fetters, the first one of which is identity view, this self-referential thinking, which causes the discursiveness, all of this chattering. This person who has entered stream entry has been able to eradicate that, along with doubt and along with dependence on ritual. So this monk who is able to do this, the stream entry, they've eradicated a great deal of their suffering. Understanding this may help you when you read the verses from the Diamond Sutra today, when you will hear that we start with the last chapter, Shubhuti, who is the person who is talking with the Buddha. In the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha asks him a question to begin the last chapter. He says, Shubhuti, if anyone says that the Buddha has spoken of a self-view, a person view, a living being, or a lifetime view, has that person understood my teachings? He's talking directly about self-reference, selfishness, self-centeredness. So when we see that, we see, oh yes, he's talking about this stream entry. So anyone who understands stream entry will know this person has let go of this. And in letting go of this, they also have let go of nearly the entire earth full of suffering. So when we practice in our daily life, pay close attention to how The mind has this tendency to chatter away, always making up a drama, and we are the center of our own drama. I like to call this, as people know, I call this the drama-rama. To let go of the drama-rama is not so easy. This is the reason that we practice as we do. This is to enter into the state of non-self-referential discursive thinking, which we would call chai. Very beneficial to let go of suffering. You will fall 1,000 times. It will hurt. You will cry. As long as you don't chatter away about it and you just stay with the practice, may we all attain that state of liberation. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings never be separated from the altruistic joy which is free from suffering. And may all beings dwell in the great equanimity which is free from attachment, aversion,